This show talks about books that feature mental health and mental illness topics. There are many books that include this topic, and my hope is that more and more people know about them because they help to decrease the stigma and help people not feel so alone in their struggle. I am your host, Robin Tamanaha, licensed marriage and family therapist. Joining me on this episode is my guest, Jodi Aman, who wrote the book Anxiety, I Am So Done With You, a teen's guide to ditching toxic stress and hardwiring your brain for happiness. Hi, Jodi.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
good. I'm so excited for today.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for being here.
Sure.
So I do like the guests to introduce themselves. So is there anything you'd like to say about yourself, like who you are, what you do, or anything else you'd like the listeners to know about
It's so
you?
hard as therapists to talk about ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
we're just supposed to talk about other people.
I know.
What,
Yeah.
nothing about me, nothing about me. Makes me very nervous. I've been doing this for a really long time. So I've been doing this for almost 25 years,
Wow.
working with people clinically. So all ages, kids, teens, adults, and pretty much full time. So that is a lot of hours under my belt and working with people and understanding how the mind works and how psychology works and how people work. And then seeing the change, like how problems have changed over time.
Mm.
It's been a really interesting. And then with this pandemic, just watching it as an observer and understanding what's happening and see people's responses change as things go on. It's interesting and heartbreaking. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah, and this pandemic has definitely done a number for sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we're dealing with such trauma. Like people are losing people that they love, or being sick themselves, and losing their businesses, losing everything, and then scared. And there's so much scared fear in the field too that's affecting. So I feel like we're holding this up, but people don't think about us as frontline workers necessarily. But all of the therapists I know have like tripled their hours to try to
Yeah.
deal with the need, and people are complaining anyway. I mean, it's just like it's been quite a time.
Yeah, definitely. I like how you said kind of frontline workers. I saw something, I think it was a few months ago, and it was talking about like just mental health professionals in the field during this pandemic. And we were kind of titled as like kind of the emotional frontline workers in a way, which I thought was like pretty accurate. We're like that holding space, and we're there for people on like just an emotional, like, mental health level. So yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it has been, I think it's been really hard on people, and I think a lot of therapists are feeling really depleted.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're
definitely.
having their own response to the pandemic and to their families. My cousin died last week, so like we're having our own stuff going on, right? And then you have all the weight of everybody else that you're talking to. So
Yeah. It's been so interesting how like it's almost like this collective trauma in a way where like we're all kind of going through
yeah.
very similar things, and that has doesn't always happen as a therapist with clients. So it's been really like interesting to be experiencing this pandemic together. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's true.
Yeah. So let's talk about your book.
Sure. I'll hold it up.
I
For the
Yeah.
people who are watching this on video, this is
Yeah.
what it looks like.
Love the title. One,
Thank you.
so done with you. It's great. And I read your book and I love it. I love
Thanks.
it. I felt like it's a nice blend of like information education and then like prompts and different activities and things to try out. So I thought I had like a really um good mix. So out of curiosity, what led to the creation of the book?
Well, I've been working with teenagers for a really long time, and they're unique right now and what they're going through. And we're all kind of experiencing more anxiety and depression over the last 60 years, but particularly for teenagers. And so they're struggling a lot. And I felt like I had some answers. Sometimes when you're with the same person, not the same person, you're with a different person every hour for 8 hours a day as a therapist, but then you're like, oh, you're kind of saying the same thing sometimes, you know,
Yeah.
and what if we could help more people? And so I was like, you want to give the information. So I started a YouTube channel and I started sharing this stuff on YouTube. And then I decided I need to, if I'm going to share in groups, you need to have a book. It's a great way to really get the information out. A lot of people don't go to therapy. I mean, when people have anxiety, they wait 3 to 10 years, I think the statistics are, before they go to therapy. So they'll pick up a book way before they get help that they need. And so they're suffering that whole time. And if I could put something in the place to stop that suffering, I wanted to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And one thing I was very surprised about when I got into private practice was how many people request book recommendations in general. So people are really interested, even teens too. There's a whole like bookstagram, book community. So everyone loves books. So it's a great resource, and your book is also is a great resource as well. Um, so let's talk about, if we can, maybe the pandemic a little. Kind of curious on, your thoughts on just like COVID pandemic and like how that's impacted or influenced anxiety.
I thought at first, I think it's changed over time. I think at first if people knew we'd have to do this, they would have freaked out, but we didn't really know. We kind of went into lockdown in last March. And it seemed like it was interesting because it seemed like anxiety went down a little bit because the pace slowed down for people. They didn't have all that social stuff to deal with. And then usually the biggest problem for people, and you might relate to this, and everyone who's listening might relate to this, but one of the biggest problems that people have is they feel like they're different than other people. They feel like, oh, everyone's okay with me. Everyone seems confident and I'm different. And that difference really affects our psyche. Like that idea of difference is not true, but we know that it's not true. But so this had a different feel because people are usually isolated, but they're isolated thinking that everyone else is out there and they're left out. Now everybody's isolated, so you belong now, even though you're isolated. So that was interesting at first. Like it seemed like anxiety went down because of that. Like people didn't feel different for a moment. And then the effects, like the neuropsychological effects on our brain of not having much to do began to take effect, and that began to be a problem, especially over a really long period of time. And so now, and then people get frustrated and they feel a bit oppressed, and they start to rebel when it's not oppression. It's like, for the greatest good and for their good as well, except for you could see it as that. So you could see how people were starting to rebel, and that caused a lot of conflict. Even in relationships, right? One person wants to rebel and not follow the rules, and the other person is like, no, we have to be careful. And that is so difficult within the same couple or within the same family. Very, very difficult. And then lastly, and then people are just sick of it.
Yeah.
They want to be done. They want to be like, I'm done with this, but you can't be. so you're stuck. So then they feel trapped. That makes anxiety go up. But I think the biggest problem is that the neuropsychology piece, because a lot of people don't realize how it's affecting them. It's a regular human response to what we're going through. But when they feel the feelings of anxiety and depression that comes with that, or feeling unmotivated, feeling exhausted, or whatever, all those responses, all those symptoms of the neuropsychology of staying still, they think they have a problem. But now again, people are thinking, I'm different, I have a problem, what's wrong with me? And the psychology, the psychic thinking it's different and something's wrong, now I have a problem, adds a whole other layer. So first of all, they have the effects of the pandemic, and then they have what they think about it and how they see themselves now, that the way they've decided it is. So I think it's really important as therapists that we're just really explaining to people, this is what's going on. Nothing's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And it's changing how they feel, how they think. It's so easy. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up as a point too, and that like the response to this and how it's a pretty natural or maybe expected response. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think, like, I've heard that before too. And are people bringing up that as a concern? Like, what's wrong with me? Like, what's going on? Is this, unusual? And it does like help to know like kind of information on like maybe even normalizing like that process a little can just like help, I think. Can you explain like what you mean by that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, anxiety anyway, there's so much mystery in it. And that really keeps anxiety in power because you're like, I don't know, why is this happening? Why is this happening? And you get so distracted by that why that you don't have any energy for healing it. And so what I do with people, like the biggest thing I do in this book is like, I explain the why, and they takes the mystery out, and it actually takes a lot of the fear away. So I'm glad that you asked me this. So what's happening is, so there's this inertia that's happening. So object emotion stays emotion, but an object at rest stays in rest. So when we're having lack of stimulation that we're having because we're not doing as much, even if you're doing stuff, I mean, a lot of people are doing stuff, it's still less. And some people drastically less. So our brain has evolved for 2 million years. Like, so humans came on the planet about 2 million years ago. It's evolved for 2 million years. And really only about the last 60 years, we haven't had to do chores all day to eat, right?
Mhm.
Like we had to like get our food every day. And maybe 100 years in the cities but 60 years in other places. Like, this is new. It's brand new. 2 million years. We have evolved to problem solve constantly and when we are safe, there's a threat out there, but we're safe. And so our brain has nothing to do to fix it. So we feel helpless. That's going to increase your anxiety. But also with that lack of stimulation, our brain tries to create or find problems because it's like, okay, no, nothing's wrong, but there's something wrong. And so I got to find it. And then people are getting their minds hooked on something little or big, or just feeling this general uneasiness or lacking motivation. So that's a whole other aspect, is like our dopamine's not firing because we're not doing anything interesting or not being as stimulated. There's a lot less dopamine hitting. And that dopamine is like, when it hits, it's like, oh, I want to do that again. We do something fun and we feel cool. And we're like, let's do it again. And then it feels cool and you want to do it again. When you have no dopamine, you stop even caring about doing anything. And that's what's in the isolation and the lack of stimulation. That's what's happening to people, is like they're having less dopamine and their interest and the motivation to do anything is low. But then they think something's really wrong with me because I don't have any motivation. But it's a normal human reaction. So not only they have no motivation, they're also totally thinking that they're really messed up now, or depressed, or anxious, or have mental illness. And so that's really, that's what I'm seeing. And so to tell people, okay, this would happen and this is how you override it, is incredible. It's like totally changing the way they're experiencing it.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, the overriding it, or what that looks like. What does that look like?
All right. So I kind of outline, of course I have a thing over this here. Okay. So I've been teaching these 5 things that we need to feel better right now. So there's 5 things that we need to bring online for our brains to be healthy. So our brain needs that stimulation. So first one is novelty. If we get some novelty in, either in the day or in the week, that's going to improve. Our brain's looking for something to stimulate it. It's like a baby. You want to put the mobiles around it. You want to take the baby out and look around. Like, we want stimulation. And so novelty, new foods. You could see a lot of people intuitively doing this. If you look online or on Facebook, your friends are like making new recipes,
Banana bread.
or they have a new hobby, or they're building something in their backyard. So that getting that novelty is what our minds need to, it actually increases its ability to do more. When you start doing new stuff, then you have the energy, it lifts your whole energy up and increases like your energetic bandwidth and helps you do more. The second, maybe is more obvious, routine. If we keep a routine, when we went into lockdown in March, now it's variable for different people, but even a lot of kids who are doing hybrid or home, they don't have that routine. And our minds love routine. Our mental health is always improved when we go to sleep at the same time, we wake up at the same time, we eat and exercise at the same time. That's always the best thing for us. But so we have to override not having a routine and create it for ourselves. So the third one is a sense of purpose. So you need to have a purpose. Like that's what a lot of people were missing this last year is like, what am I doing for anybody?
Yeah.
And you feel untethered. You just don't, our soul wants a purpose. Our psyche wants a purpose. Like that's what motivates us. That's what gets us moving forward. And so you have to have some kind of purpose, doing something for somebody else, creating, learning. A lot of these overlap, you could see. Like things that are novel could also create a purpose. So that's nice. But we do, in all the happiness and longevity studies, purpose is a number one. People, if you don't have a purpose, you don't live long and you're not happy. So, and that's kind of been stripped away in some cases. And so we have to bring that back on. Number 4, community, because isolation, horrible for your neuropsychology, right? The isolation is totally, you decrease all kinds of dopamine, and then people get really disinterested in everything. And that's when it's really scary. So having a community, we're only a self in relationship. And so we need to relate to other people to have a robustness in ourselves. If we're alone and we don't have that, we have no sense of self. Our sense of self diminishes. And then 5 in these overlap too is creativity. So we need to bring in that prefrontal cortex, as we need to stimulate our prefrontal cortex as much as we possibly can so that our reptilian brain doesn't get all the playtime. And so if we're constantly creative and we're problem solving, it gives our brain something to do. Feels like it has a purpose. It's novelty. It's releasing those endorphins, those neuropeptides. It's building our confidence. And so we need those 5 things. And when people bring those online, it's like a 180.
Yeah. So I have lots of thoughts. So not just with anxiety, but even like the pandemic in general, I think there was like this period, and even myself, I thought, what do I do? Where you're just kind of like beside, like to yourself, and you're like, what do I do? Like, I don't have anything to do. I don't know what I could do, but you just listed like 5 different options. So there are like a lot of options that could be explored as far as how to tackle that.
Yeah.
It's very encouraging. That's really hopeful too. I think.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I really started to notice that if you start to think you're trapped, like you can notice. So if you started to see your limits, it gets really frustrating. It's anxiety provoking. You just see more limits.
Yeah.
Right? We always have limits on our life. We've always had limits. It's like you can't walk, 100 miles in an hour. We can't do that, but we've just adjusted. So we walk, 3 miles in an hour or something. And so, but we see our abilities instead of so I started helping people think about our restrictions as a same limit that we've always had, but there's always unlimited options under that. And if you start to see your unlimited options of what you can do, instead of focusing so much about what you can do, you actually start to open up more options. So when we start brainstorming about, well, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this, all of a sudden more things open up because our brain is good at that. Actually, we're really good at being adaptable. We're really good at problem solving. It's everybody. I'm not just saying some people are good. Yeah, some people are better at problem solving because they don't have that doubt that comes up that just shuts them down. And so we have to get rid of that doubt because our brains are made for it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So with this, I mean, with all these different great options, even if we think like teens or teen anxiety, like how would one go about kind of discovering like what would work for them as far as the different options?
Well, if that's why I don't say you have to do, you have to build something in your backyard. I say you have to do something creative because there's a million different things. And sometimes it could just be cleaning out a drawer in the moment when you're feeling like, I can't do anything. Sometimes people have to like listen to a podcast and clean out a drawer. That's where they might have to start. If their anxiety is so intense, I always think if somebody's anxiety is so intense, Anxiety is engaging. It really engages your attention. And so what we have to do is learn how to pull our attention away from that on something else. And the more you spend away from anxiety, the less anxiety gets.
Mm.
But when it's got playtime, for some people 24/7, when they're in an intense episode, to get them out of that episode, I have them do two things at once. So they're listening to a fictional book, because it's like out of their story. Because if they're listening to nonfiction self-help book, they're still thinking about themselves. It's still giving more attention to the anxiety. Of course, I'm a writer of nonfiction books, but yeah, I tell people to read fiction in this state, and be walking around. If they can't leave their house, be walking around and cleaning up the plants. Your plants could always be trimmed. You could always fluff pillows or clean stuff up. Things always have to be put away in our house. So at first you're doing like two things at once to try to get your attention away, and it works pretty quickly. So then you only need one thing. Within a few days, you only need one thing. It happens that fast.
That's really neat. The fictional book idea. I think that's really cool.
Well, we need to get out of our heads. That's what the
Yeah.
pandemic's so difficult is, because, a lot of people, when they have anxiety, they stop going to work or they pull back from life. If you have depression or anxiety, you want to pull back.
Yeah.
Worst thing you could do, it's like give your brain all of that time to give all the attention to anxiety. It's like people go to bed and think about their anxiety.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Do something. You need to. So anxiety is engaging. If anxiety is intense, you need something very engaging. So people are like, just deep breathe, just, clear your mind. Not if your anxiety is that intense. You won't be. You need to do sometimes, if you breathe and count, like a counting pattern that like changes. So you have to keep remembering it and figure it out. You need like two things.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. Because like you said earlier, the brain's going to kind of search for something, right?
Yeah.
It's going to find something. So something like a fictional book or doing two things at once is
And when
great.
when your adrenaline's out, it does it even faster. So, when you have adrenaline in your blood, because your amygdala sends the adrenaline out and sends the message to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is like, I got to find a problem. So it's more intense. So while you're waiting for your adrenaline to go down, if you're not afraid, it goes down pretty quickly. You need something to pull it away from that. That's really engaging.
Yeah. Yeah. And I liked how you said that it's kind of like, even with the fictional book and doing something else, even if it's like, organizing the drawer, it doesn't have to be these like huge, like large things, because sometimes people think like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to do this complete overhaul and get to, point B or whatever it may be. But, realistically, and what's feasible is like in steps, so it's kind of like also practicing to like this new way of responding in a way to the anxiety or the particular thoughts. Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, if I was to be like, you have to go out to dinner with your friend, that might be like, well, I can't even think, when you have anxiety that you can't make decisions or think,
Yeah.
And so we need to get you back in control of your thoughts first. And so we need something that engaging. That's not for everybody. Some people's anxiety is not that intense, but they have anxiety and they're really suffering. And then then they're at their step. You have to start where someone is.
Right.
And then take them on their next step. That's where sometimes people could get an episode that's really intense. And then you want to get them out of that. And then you could start talking about other stuff
Yeah.
But I do like to, in my books, like, I have two books back here. I don't know if you could see them if I'm split like this, but in my books, like I've discovered, I had my own anxiety. And so I discovered 6 steps to curing anxiety. And the first step is understanding it biologically. And I have to say that for about 50% of my clients, that's all they need is that first step, because it is the mystery of anxiety. So if you want to if you're like, what? Get my book. It, explains it, and it really changes. It takes the mystery out of it. So it takes the fear out of it. Anxiety needs you to be afraid of it.
Right. And I like I have the book here too. There was the way like your book is laid out is really cool too, where it's some of them too were like thoughts as well. And it was like I think it was labeled as lies, like lies that
Yeah.
like your brain. And I thought that was like really, really neat because I read through these and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so something that would like pop in someone's head. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was
Yeah.
really cool.
The second step, so my 6 steps to cure anxiety, the first one's understand it biologically, and the second one is learn the lies that it tells.
Yeah.
In my other book, You Want Anxiety Zero, I go over 15 common lies that anxiety tells.
Oh,
So, and it really, they come from these 20, 2 decades of working with people, because I wrote the book a while ago. They are a conglomeration of what anxiety has told all the people I've talked to over those 20 years. And so they're so common and relatable. So so we think they're true, we kind of rationalize that they're true. And so when you see them like this, how I present them in my book, they don't, like, now they understand that they're lies, and it changes how they experiencing them and if they're believing them. Like, anxiety needs you to believe it.
Right. Right.
And so if you realize, because you could see through the stories, you could relate to it and be like, oh, I understand why that's a lie. Then they stop believing it, and the anxiety has no more power.
Definitely. Yeah. It takes away the power. Yeah. And
I feel like
also,
that's why I'm different than other people, is like, other people give you skills, but I take the power of anxiety down. And
Yeah.
that comes from my history in narrative therapy.
yeah, that's really neat. And I think too, even seeing it, like seeing all the different lies laid out, it also, I wonder if it would help people not feel alone in a sense. Because sometimes people think like, well, am I the only one that thinks this or feels this way? Everyone may look, like they're not experiencing it, or so I feel like too, in a way, it also I guess helps people just not feel like they're the only ones too. Like these are actually quite common, and that in itself too, I would think would be pretty helpful as well, just in itself.
Yeah, I think so. That's why I wrote it that way.
Yeah, yeah. Um, anything I didn't ask about anxiety or your book that you want to bring up?
Well, there's so much gems in here. And so if people want to get it, and it's written for teenagers, but really parents are getting so much out of it because it helps them understand.
Yeah.
I do have an audio program for parents. So if they read through it, then they could listen and understand a little bit more and why and how they could support in that. And then I have programs for kids and teenagers, but I'm also going to start teaching therapists. So therapists love the book, educators love the book, parents love the book, but it is written in the voice of it if a teenager was listening to it or reading it.
Yeah. So it can definitely be helpful for many, it sounds like, which is great. And I like too that section in the back also for parents. I thought that was like really cool and creative too.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you know what? Because teens are so concerned. I have their parents don't understand.
Yeah.
And so on the first page, I say like, oh, if your parents don't understand, have them like cut this page. I have like scissors,
Yeah.
scissor marks so they could, cut out the page and give this section here to their parents so that their parents could understand a little bit more and know where to find more information and that kind of thing. So hopefully it'll increase like the compassion and make someone connect. I'm for connecting families, obviously.
Yeah. And I would think too, even just knowing more information, having that better understanding, for the loved ones, I would, especially if it's, caregivers or parents, I would think too, that really just help with that relationship and that bond too. Yeah.
Because we don't solve our problems in a vacuum. We solve our problems in relationships.
Yeah, definitely. Very
We're
true.
social learners, and so we learn with other people, and we want parents to back kids up, and parents want to do that too.
Yeah. They definitely do. Yeah.
They feel helpless, and therapists feel, to be honest, I'm on a lot of Facebook pages with therapists, and they're feeling really helpless in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, before we end, I know you mentioned a few things that you're working on. If someone wanted to find out more about you and like all the different, projects and different things that you're doing, where would they go? Would it be like your website or where would
My website's jodiaman.com, jodiaman.com. And I do, when you're over there, I do have a free training about how to increase your emotional bandwidth. So how to let go. I've created a 3-step process to letting go. It is in the book too, but if you're like, oh, I just need to listen to something, it's wonderful. That is for anybody. It's for teenagers, it's for caregivers, it's for parents, educators, therapists, to really be able to clear the stuff that weighs them down, to connect with their inner trust. And then that increases your bandwidth to deal with the world.
Right. Right. That's really neat. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I will do is on the show notes of this episode and then also on the booksbetweensessions.com website, I put the episodes on there
Okay.
too. I'll have your website listed and then as well as like your social media handles and stuff too, if
Great.
anyone wants to go there, and even maybe your YouTube, since you're doing that. You're doing many things. This is great.
I know, it's
Lots of
busy.
resources. Lots of
It's busy.
resources.
Yeah, I'm gonna start teaching therapists some doing some CU. I was doing CU credits before we locked down, live trainings, and so now I'm bringing them online. I got delayed for a few different reasons. Plus, I just don't want to say no to any clients who need some help right now. So it delays everything else online. But
yeah. Well, thank you, Jodi, for being here. I can see how your book is helpful for many, and I love it. So I'll definitely be going back to it throughout the remainder of this pandemic and life. So, yeah, like I said, I'll have all the information on the show notes and then the website. And then you can also go to Jodi's website directly for her resources as well as the audio. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.